Welcome to CAL Chat, where we talk about our favorite Al-Anon and Alateen conference-approved literature and how it's improved our lives. But first, the disclaimer. The comments expressed in this podcast are solely those of my own and the guests. This podcast is not affiliated or endorsed by Al-Anon Family Groups or the Rural Service Office. In fact, it doesn't reflect the views of any other institutions to which I'm affiliated or should be committed to. Identities of the guests have been changed where needed to protect the innocent. And no alcoholics were harmed in the making of this podcast. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to CAL Chat, where we talk about our favorite Al-Anon and Alateen conference-approved literature and how it's improved our lives. And with me today is Jan. Thanks for joining the show today, Jan.
You're welcome.
What is your favorite piece of CAL literature that you've chosen to talk about today?
I've chosen a paragraph from Survival to Recovery. It's on the bottom of page 14 and it extends a little into the top of page 15.
Just to clarify, I know that this book went through a revision in 2007. Do you have the first edition from 1994 or the 2007 edition? Because the pages changed, I think, on them.
This is the 2007 version.
Got it. Okay. I just want to be able to follow along. All right. So you said page 14, and it's near the end, you said?
Yeah, the last paragraph on page 14.
Okay.
Starting with growing up. I really related to this because it was in this paragraph where I really saw myself, especially in my teenage years, and how I was coping with what was going on at home. I really identified with the unpredictability that it talked about and masking it with trying to be perfect, and just some exact examples they were giving in the paragraph are the things that I used to do, but basically it just talks about being over-organized and overachieving and overscheduled and overcommitting and over everything, the opposite of balance. So that's what I really related to.
So from Survival to Recovery, in our district, we have a literature study group. Is this one that you've covered in that literature study group?
Yes, it is. And now, actually, since we're an adult child focus group, we exclusively read from this book. So we just started it over. It took us about a year to go through it the first time, and we just started over recently, and I reread these pages in the beginning here in this page 14 and 15, and it really jumped out at me. And every time I read this book, and I've read it several times, but every time something else jumps out at me, and it's because I'm in a different place, and I've had, more recovery, and another layer, has been peeled back, and I see things more clearly. So it's been a real blessing to be able to read these things again and again, cover to cover, and gathering more little words of wisdom as each time I go through it.
And for someone that is unfamiliar or maybe has never been to a literature study group, can you explain how it's done at the group you go to for this book?
Yes, what we do is we take one story at a time, so one story each week, and then we take turns reading one paragraph, and if anyone doesn't want to read, they can just say pass, but we read one paragraph, taking turns going around in the circle. And then when we're done with the story, we just open it up for general sharing. And at that point, anyone can share on any part of the story. We don't go in order. It's just whatever parts you could relate to, you share on.
And you mentioned it takes about a year to get through the full book. Is that right?
Yeah, because we do about a story a week. And, sometimes if it's a short story, we might read a few stories a week. But most of the time, there's so much that we feel, that we want to share on that we use the time sharing and not just reading.
I think you hit on a good point that you could belong to a literature study group that just focuses on one book for many years, but you get different things out of that book every year that you read it. And it's amazing that even though we know the words on the pages are staying the same, because we're changing in our recovery, it's almost like the words change. And sometimes it's like, I don't remember that story last time I read it. The book just seems different each time you go through it.
That's right. And there's always something, even if our experience is a little different. Some of the stories in this book are pretty heavy, and sometimes I can see where some people may not be able to relate, well, that didn't happen to me. But then there's something that's said, some words are mentioned, and then almost always there's something that I can really relate to, that I can lock on to, even if the circumstances were different than what I had growing up.
The one story that always gets me is on, at least in the 2007 revised edition, it's on page 269, and it's Untangling Confusion. And it's almost like written like a poem, I would say, because the author keeps reiterating things that were happening to her when she was 5 years old. And,
I remember that one. Oh, yeah, that was a very powerful meeting now that I think about that. All of us started out our share with when I was 5.
Oh.
That was really, and I know exactly what I said that night. It really, it was something I hadn't thought about in probably 30 years. But that's
got to have the tissue-ready group for that one.
Oh, yeah. We passed the tissue around that night. But, yeah, it really does sometimes bring up a lot of old stuff, but that's good because once you bring it up and you can identify it, and then you can process it and heal from it. It's all that stuff that, I stuffed down that I'm not in touch with that actually still affects me. And that's the kind of thing that this book does, is it brings up some of that old stuff, another layer that I get down to that I'm able to bring up, process, and heal from.
You had mentioned as well that you'd created a workshop around this book, or you had hosted a workshop. Is that right?
Yes, I've done a few workshops on this, and just about every convention the last several years, I've done a workshop, and usually this book is my first choice because I'm reading from it every week. But the last 2 years, we've done the AA convention and hosted an Al-Anon workshop for the AA convention. And what's been so powerful is that we've had several people come over from the AA program and sit in on the workshop, and they can really relate to the stories from survival to recovery. Because a lot of people in the AA program did grow up in alcoholic homes, and for the first time, it helps to put the pieces together for them as to why they do some of the things that they do. And it's just really, I'm just so grateful to be a part of a workshop like that when you see the light bulbs go on. And we just generally read from this book. And the one that we did in recently, just a few months ago, it was this exact paragraph that I used and could kind of explain my recovery and how it's really helped me to be in touch with why do I do the things that I do and why did I do the things even way back when I was very young.
I was looking through just briefly kind of the whole CAL catalog, and I was trying to rack my brain of where else in this whole library of Al-Anon literature is there a book that just focuses on adult children of alcoholics. And other than maybe the pamphlet that's Adult Children for Alcoholics,
right.
This book is it. This is the central book, like kind of the go-to book for anyone that has grown up with alcoholism in their family.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why in my home group we decided to just continuously reread this because there's no other group that I know of in the area that's doing that. It's something that, we would like to offer because in one of the other conventions that we did a workshop on, the Al-Anon convention, we had people in there that have been in Al-Anon many, many years. But then they just popped into this workshop where we read from this book, and it just hit them right between the eyes. They never even identified themselves as growing up in an alcoholic home. They identified themselves as having, married an alcoholic or a child who's an alcoholic, but they did not identify themselves until they heard some stories from this book. And so that's why I'm pretty passionate about trying to share what, I've learned from this book and share it with others.
It's just another way to peel another layer of the onion off.
Right.
To get down to finding out about ourselves and looking at our past. And I know for me, this book seems to have a theme of creating something from nothing, where growing up, I have a big hole in me because, my alcoholic parent isn't able to give me the love that I wanted, that I needed. So through Al-Anon, I eventually get to the point where I get that love through the fellowship. I become mature through working the steps. And this book really kind of shows that progress, I think, in almost every story of, I don't know how else to describe it other than going from nothing to something.
Right. There's always hope. At the end of the stories, even no matter how dark the stories are, at the end there's always hope. And it's shown me that it explains for me why I used to be very driven. I wanted to be in charge of everything. I just thought that was my personality. And I felt like very trapped in these words that they use in this paragraph in particular jumped out at me. I was trapped in a compulsive need, and that I compulsively pushed myself to just give more and do more. And this book helped just put those puzzle pieces together to see, oh, this is why I did that, and this is why I continue to do that if I'm not strong in my recovery, because it explains the family disease in that it's a disease of extremes. It's extreme for the alcoholic. It's an extreme for me in Al-Anon. And, learning to have balance and take care of myself, those are the things that in the end of the stories they talk about. They talk about, how holding on to anger and resentment hurts me, not the person I'm wanting to hurt, but it really hurts me. Like, they say drinking poison, hoping to kill the other person. Well, holding on to all that anger and resentment just brings me down. And, I don't want that anymore. And with the tools of the program and through the hope I read in these stories, I know now how to get out of that. And it's just been such a blessing to be able to see not only my recovery, but other people in my home group that have come from so far where they couldn't even really get through the stories. Some people can't, and that's okay. You take a break or you don't share then, but eventually most of them come back, and you can see once they are able to get in touch with some of that old, deep stuff, they can really just let it go. I believe you got to feel it before you can heal it, and that's the really good part of this book. It really helps you to dig in.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point you mentioned about seeing other people in the meeting, that they're changing, they're getting better, and I think that kind of gets back to what you were saying about there is hope. If it's working for them, maybe it'll work for me.
Right.
And I think that's very empowering and very uplifting as well. It's a good message. Well, I'd like to take a break now. We'll come back to speak a little bit about outreach literature. Right now, we'll take a break to hear a few words from one of our sponsors.
Hi, this is Marie, and as a sponsor, my words to pass along are easy does it. I say this one a lot to people in the program. For me, it means that I'm allowed to sit back and reflect before making any decisions, either big ones or little ones. It means that I can go easy on myself, that I can take care of myself and go at my own speed, which has been really important for me because I ran around frantic for most of my life before I came into this program. I don't have to feel forced by the disease to act before I'm ready. And this is really big for me because I used to feel like I had to just make a decision, any decision. Now I know I don't have to be hard on myself or on others, and I can take it easy, which I really like. Those are my words of wisdom. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for those wise words from one of our sponsors. Well, that's where we have to end part 1 of episode 4. Part 2 continues about Jan's favorite literature to use for outreach, and it's also available to listen to as well. Hope you enjoy.